Say that we are outwardly very expressive and in the confines of Judaism, and for those of you that joined us here, thank you. For those of you that didn't join us here, there's always next year. But onwards and upwards in the Jewish calendar, there's not much time between Purim and the next holiday of Pesach. 28 days left. Not to scare anybody, but we're sitting having a Purim Seudah, one of the 4 mitzvot of the day, is to have a festive meal, and we, between morning obligations here and afternoon obligations, we jetted across the bridge to Rachel's parents, to Teaneck, and we're sitting there having a meal, and I look up, and on top of the bookshelves, there's already like boxes and boxes of matzah. I said, please tell me that's from last year. And Mom's like, no, I'm already halfway down through the kitchen, and Pesach is upon us. No time, you snooze, you lose. So the next 3 weeks following tonight, we're going to focus purely on Passover preparation. There'll be 2 classes on Pesach itself, some of the ideas of the holiday and takeaways from the holiday. The week preceding Passover, which I'm not sure of the date right now, it's a Tuesday, we're going to do a model seder. It won't be here, it'll be downstairs, including 4 cups of wine that are obligatory, and matzah. We'll go through the entire seder. Everyone is encouraged to take notes. We give handouts, so you'll be able to have your Passover seder the following week, hopefully with some fresh insights, some how-tos, and know exactly which way to lean it that won't cause any choking, God forbid. Tonight's discussion is a really standalone topic, and with that I look forward to beginning. Any questions, concerns, thoughts? The most important thing you should all know right now is that we are closing in on 500 people for Shabbat across America this week. Wow. Which is a record in the history for KJ, which is very exciting. If you haven't signed up, put your hand up. Really?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Super impressive.
You want to be here? Okay, if you know anybody that would like to come, if you guys...
Where are you guys?
You guys trying to fill a second room?
Sorry?
You guys trying to fill a second room?
We're doing splitting rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
we
can't
can't
fit.
fit.
Wine talk about it. He was saying, I mean, just from yesterday, he was at like, I think he was at like just below 400.
Yeah, there was a logistical concern to get everybody into one room, but well, there's a will, there's a way. We're going to do it.
MSG?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're actually going to City Field for Shabbat dinner. Guys, please, we're going to hit 500 only with your help. Please encourage a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, even an enemy, anyone. Just ask somebody to join us. Help us hit 500. It's going to be beautiful and a wonderful community building experience for all. This week, March 21st. Okay, any extras? Thank you.
No, good. No.
No? Okay. Oh, you have storage.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So tonight's topic, inheritance or heritage. So before we get into the, I guess, background about why this question, why we're even posing this question, what is the difference? How would you define the difference between inheritance and heritage?
Inheritance? Money.
Right.
That's what we get or
Yeah.
something.
Something. Wait, what'd you say? Something.
Like a thing, a gift or a...
Money.
Tangible?
Right.
Yeah.
Something
right.
tangible. Money. Something that you get.
It's
Right.
funny how people hear the word inheritance, money.
No, that's right. But that's part of it. Right.
Family
Exactly.
heirloom.
Okay, but
heirloom.
Angela, you said something tangible, something
Yeah,
material.
thing.
Like something,
Yeah.
a thing. Okay, what else? What else is how would you define inheritance?
Like your
Personal,
yeah.
personally owned
Personally owned,
By somebody else or by you?
by you once it's your inheritance.
once it's your inheritance. Okay, yeah.
When someone passes away.
Right, usually right, exactly.
It's like character traits.
Maybe like family tradition. No, not tradition.
Yeah, traditions could fall, traditions can fall, like you inherit certain traditions, I guess. Yeah, you can have traditions. But yeah, but definitely, inheritance is often associated with death, because when somebody dies, then therefore it causes inheritance. Okay, how about the word heritage? How would you define heritage?
More publicly oriented.
Publicly oriented?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
Cultural.
Okay,
Or your ancestors?
right.
Not as personal as the first one? Yeah?
Applies to more people.
It's like more
A
global,
wider
a
group.
wider group, right?
It's not actual ownership.
Ah, interesting. Okay, why do you say that?
Never heard heritage used in the sense of an actual owned legacy. It's not legally owned.
Not legally owned. So when have you heard the context? When have you heard heritage? In what context?
In a cultural context.
Okay.
It's our,
So more
Judaism
broad.
is our heritage.
Judaism is a heritage as opposed to an inheritance.
Yeah.
Right?
It's something that you're a part of, I think, more so. Like you're part of a heritage versus something that you acquire.
Excellent. Right. So and acquiring goes back to something either material or right? Is that
Agreed.
okay?
Defines who you are to some
Heritage.
extent.
Right. Whereas inheritance doesn't
Right.
have to, right. Money can or cannot define you.
Right.
A thing can or cannot define you. Right. So heritage. So interesting. So it's more macro, so more broad, and applies to more people, and not necessarily something oriented, but more general. Is that like sum it up basically? Okay. Awesome. Fantastic. So there's a reason this question is coming up. So last week when we were talking about the story of Purim, we introduced this book, the Concordance, right? And the Concordance goes through every single word in all of Tanakh, throughout the entire canon, and tells you how many times that word has been used and what the references are. The word morasha, which is translated as heritage, is only used twice in all of Torah. In all of Tanakh, it's only used twice. And it comes from the same root word as the word Yerusha. It's the same word as the word inheritance. So the way Hebrew, for Hebrew speakers or for soon-to-be Hebrew speakers, the word Yerusha, the shoresh there, the root word there is what's used to build other words as well. So for example, in Hebrew, you might have the word lamad, lamed mem daled, which means to learn. And then there's all these conjugations of that same exact root word to mean I learned in the past, I'm going to teach, I went to learn. Like there are all these different usages of the word that you basically gets conjugated into various forms. So the word Yerusha and Morasha have the identical shoresh, the identical root word, but they translate a little bit differently in English as inheritance and as heritage. Except that what's unique about the word Morasha is that it's only used twice in all of Torah. So what we're going to do is take a look at the two circumstances where it's used in Torah and see why it's used in that particular circumstance and what it is that we're supposed to learn out of it. This style, and again what we introduced last week with the Concordance, this is a very specific style to the study of Tanakh, to the study of the canon, because you actually can learn out very deep and powerful messages just by the words that are used. Forgetting the commentators, forgetting context, forgetting any of that stuff, by just looking at the words themselves, you can derive an enormous amount of depth about whatever the text is trying to relay. So it's literally like there are these hidden messages that are embedded within the text without even having to explain it, just by looking at the words itself.
The first two source
Sorry,
is very well known. It's often one of the first songs taught at Jewish kindergarten and nursery. It's the first sentence there, taken from Deuteronomy. Actually, speaking of being taught at kindergarten, you should share a funny story.
This is, so Kira, when she was 2, she started at a school
Early
in New
admissions.
Jersey, right? Early admissions, right? She started at school in New Jersey, and she comes home and she starts singing Torah, Torah, Torah. Everybody familiar with the song? She goes Torah, 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 Tziva Lanu, Jose, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. Moshe is now officially of Hispanic descent, and like it was just so cute. She was so passionate. She's like Jose. I was like, right, okay, great. So she has since learned that it's actually Morasha, that it's actually Moshe, but that is actually, isn't that great? It's so funny. That is actually the second time that the word Morasha is used, but we're doing this first. So what's the source? In the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 33, verse 5, I'm sorry, it's actually verse 4, the Torah states, the Torah that Moses commanded us is a legacy for the congregation of Jacob. Okay? The word legacy there is morasha in English. Again, you okay, buddy? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, we're good. We're done. Okay, so that the word here it's translated as legacy, but it could also actually be. Yeah, you want to do it? Yeah, go for it. Be sorry guys. Bye. Okay, so So it's translated as legacy, but it's also heritage. So it's this word morasha. So Torah tziva lanu Moshe, the Torah that Moses commanded us, is a legacy, is a heritage. It's specifically not a Yerusha. Okay, so that's more
Sorry,
what's important here.
What's Yerusha?
Yerusha means inheritance. So it's from the same root word.
Legacy is that's almost like a direct contradiction.
Legacy to inheritance.
I mean, legacy is usually pretty. Well, I don't know. Usually, it's often pretty material. I don't know.
Well, no, go ahead. I mean,
Legacy. I guess legacy could be either way. Legacy, I think, is usually more material. Right? Not always.
Like,
Certainly
right.
not always.
Right. So it happens to. I mean, it's very interesting. It could be. I mean, I often think about like I want to think of like a legend or legacy. Sound effects, fabulous. It's because the camera, sound effects. My God, like lights, camera, action. So it could be. And legacy is also the English, how it's translated here. It's not exactly like a completely accurate translation.
Right.
So what it's actually usually translated as heritage. So Moshe commanded us a heritage, that this Torah that we have is a morasha, but it's what we should really almost infer from this verse is that what Torah is, it's not a Yerusha, it's not an inheritance, it's a morasha. It's this other category of legacy, heritage, something other than material, what's materially inherited. Okay, so the first time morasha is used, or second time, but in one of the contexts, Torah is a morasha. Okay, fine. So moving on to the next source, from the book of Exodus. Anybody want to read this one?
It's actually the first one.
Right. This comes first chronologically. Anybody want to go for it?
I will bring you to the land concerning which I raised my hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you as a heritage.
Excellent. So the second time that the word morasha is used is in reference to Eretz Yisrael. It's in reference to the land of Israel. So, a glaring question: if morasha is only used twice in all of Tanakh, why would this word be used in reference to Torah? And why would this word be used in reference to Eretz Yisrael? So this approach to studying Tanakh is basically we're going to draw some type of parallel and some type of connection between these two separate ideas, Torah and Eretz Yisrael, and somehow we're going to draw a parallel because this word is only used twice in all of Torah. There must be some connection between the two of them. Why is it that these two things, Torah and Eretz Yisrael, why is it that these two things are considered a heritage and not an inheritance?
I think it's because it's something that you're part of. Again, going back to that, I think heritage is something that is within you, or or something you don't really have a choice in the matter, in a sense, right? It's just you're part of it,
right?
And Torah is something that you live by, you study, it's part of you, and the land is the land that So I don't know. That's just.
Being like summing it up as like it would be a heritage because you're part of something as opposed to something that's just purely inherited.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that like inheritance is for an individual, and heritage is more for a class of people, I guess. So, Torah and Israel is for all people. It's not for any one person.
Right.
Individual.
There's no
ownership. There's no. I don't know.
No. Very good. Yeah, no, excellent. So, right, because I guess you could think that if we go back to the idea that it happens when somebody dies, let's say, then an inheritance would be for the immediate relatives.
For one class. For like one small, I guess, a small group.
Exactly. So either it's an individual or a
it's
family.
Not for,
or
when someone dies, not all the Jewish people get something.
It's not for the masses.
It's not for the masses.
Right. So it's not for the masses, whereas these two things, maybe it falls into a different category because it is something that is given for all, right? Very interesting idea. Any other thoughts? Yeah, no, please.
Sorry. And it's also it's also a choice. Heritage is more of a choice, whereas inheritance is more of a it is. I mean, you get that. Heritage you have a choice, where the Torah you have a choice. With Israel you have a choice.
Interesting. Okay, continue. I mean,
as opposed to inheritance, which I mean. You want to continue on heritage?
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah, this is
a choice. Something that we chose at Sinai, that we chose to keep this, and we could have easily not. And so therefore, like this is almost like it's a reward. It's not really a reward. I don't know.
But you can't really disown your heritage,
That-
can you?
Sure you can.
How?
But it's still in you. It's
Just
still
renounce it.
there.
Renounce it. Don't, you know.
But you still belong to it.
Yeah. And I feel like to some degree, just
Mhm.
other side, inheritance seems to me something that can be chosen for a specific person. You know, if you liked one child more than another, you could leave them your whole inheritance. So
For example,
that's,
right?
you know,
Exactly.
can be on the other side a chosen thing, whereas heritage is just something that you grew up in that household, you have this heritage, you have this, I don't know, relationship to your past, or
Do you take
in some
less?
way that seems like something you are. Not,
People
Very
take
interesting.
less
So it
of a-
defines more of you,
or where you come
where
from.
you come from.
Is there less of a personal responsibility in a heritage than an inheritance?
Inheritance is less.
Maybe there's
than
inheritance.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
less.
that's-
Inheritance
yeah.
is less.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, this is okay. Awesome. Did you have a comment also? Did you want to say something?
Something completely different. I mean,
Go for
again,
it.
My
Please.
lectures are all mixed up now. Didn't we have a discussion about a word that only occurs twice in the Torah, or maybe in the Megillah? I don't even
Yes.
remember
Ooh,
last
sorry.
week. Or
Scared you.
what was that? What
That
was the
was-
significance of that?
That was last week with regard to Purim, that the word Bira, meaning capital city, was used in reference to Shushan, and the only other time it's ever used is in reference to the city of Jerusalem. And it was just to highlight the mentality and the state of the Jewish people at that time, that they were looking to the wrong Bira, that they were looking to the wrong capital. Their eyes should have been in Jerusalem, and yet their eyes were set on Shushan.
So there's no Toraic law about words that appear only twice.
It's not a law, but it's a system. It's a system of learning. It's a methodology, an approach to study of Tanakh. And this is a broad stroke that can be used across the board. There's different types of literary structures: chiastic structure, different literary themes, poetry, rhyming schemes, rhythm. There's a lot that's used actually throughout the entire Tanakh, and and based on various learnings and various words and again structure, you can actually derive a very significant meaning from the text just from the words itself, without having to dig into the commentators. So it's an approach. It's basically just like a methodology to approach Tanakh.
For many people now, a lot of their study of text, and certainly of the 5 books of the Torah, as we do like each week at the intermediate services, we use commentaries of the commentators, of the sages throughout the years, whether it's Rashi or Sforno or Ramban, to interpret their viewpoints on the text. There's a completely different style where we're not, as Rachel mentioned earlier, not utilizing anybody's interpretation, but looking at the parallels and the different uses of the words. This amazing book, the Concordance, which was not done in the age of computers.
Right.
So it wasn't done when people were able to scan all the text and have references. It was done by brilliant minds, or mind, that composed it,
Right.
which even makes it much more powerful.
Right. And you think about how many words are in Tanakh. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of words. We're talking about 24 books with each of them have various chapters. I mean, Psalms alone has 150 chapters with verses that each make up those chapters. You're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of words. So for a word to only be used twice is quite significant. So that's why the concordance, again, if you it's like a Google almost for Tanakh. So it's like you can like Google a word in Tanakh. That's like what the concordance is. So if you look up the word Vayomer, which means and he said, you'll see thousands and thousands of references to the word Vayomer. So in that respect, Vayomer is not necessarily a significant word in that respect. But when you come to certain words and it's mentioned 4 or 5 times, once, twice, when you get to words like that, then you start to be able to draw parallels between even cross history. You might have a word that'll appear, in the story of Purim that's also appears in the story of Joseph, which actually there is a case about that. So what's the parallel between the two? So then you can start to learn some pretty deep and very, very spiritually enhancing messages about the text. So, but very good question. But in effect, that's what Morashah is. So that's why we need to dig into this idea of heritage, because it's only used twice, and it's used in a pretty significant way. I mean, we're talking about the Torah, we're talking about Eretz Yisrael, and talking lands of Israel. So we're talking about 2 not small items here. So if you take a look at source number 3, this is taken from the Jerusalem Talmud, from Baba Batra, chapter number 8. So there is the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Both were composed roughly around the same time, after the Jews were exiled Bavel, to Babylon, the Talmud, there were a bunch of rabbis that sat and discussed and created the Talmud there, and then there was a parallel one happening inside Israel at that time. So there are two parallel Talmuds.
Nowadays, the most commonly studied Talmud is which one?
Babylon.
The Babylonian Talmud, for many reasons which I discussed in another class, which actually someone asked me if we could help possibly give meaning to all the different texts that exist within Judaism and the various philosophers and names. So I thought maybe one class can just be going through the main key rabbis and some of their texts and do that, which would focus on the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. For many reasons, the Babylonian Talmud was sort of won out, but nowadays there's been a resurgence of the studying of the Jerusalem Talmud, and people also study it as well.
Retro is in.
Sorry?
Retro is in.
Retro is in. Okay, I don't want to read source number 3.
Yochanan objected.
Sam, would you read?
Yochanan objected, and I will bring you into the land of your forefathers. If it is spoken of as a gift, then why is it spoken of as an inheritance? And it is spoken of as an inheritance. And if it is spoken of as a lot of little words. If it is spoken of as an inheritance, why is it spoken of as a gift? After it was given, he went and gave it to them as an inheritance, said Rabbi Hoshea. In any case, in any case in which the word inheritance is used, it is language of doubt, weakening.
Excellent. So it actually gets a little lost in translation. Now, it's very wordy. It gets a little lost in translation here, but the Gemara is raising a question about if there are different references to Eretz Yisrael. Is it spoken of as a matana? Is it a gift? Or is it a heritage or an inheritance? And here he says, which one is it? Like, pick your game. Are you an inheritance or are you a gift? Which one are you?
It's focusing on the source from Exodus.
Focusing on the source from Exodus, correct. And the Gemara is trying to interpret that, or using that source to interpret and understand something else. So he says that the Gemara concludes that whenever the word morasha is used, whenever the word heritage or not inheritance is used, it's a language of doubt or weakening, meaning it's a doubtful form of inheritance. Okay, so what does that mean?
Wait, when Morasha is used, it's a doubtful form of inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I
Yes.
thought I put the opposite here.
No.
At the bottom? In any case in which the word inheritance
Yeah,
is used.
morash, because it's a messy translation. The
Oh,
word
okay.
when he says inheritance here, it's the word morasha. I
Look
would
at the
just
first
insert
word.
the Hebrew word there because it's a little bit confusing because the translations are not consistent.
If you look at the Hebrew word, there's no why we always like to give actually the Hebrew translation as well. The last line of the Gemara, source 3, the first word on the last line is morasha, which is the word we're focusing on. So every time that word is used, it's a language of doubt, a weakening, a lessening of. What might that mean?
Sorry, I just want to go back to the translation again. Is every occurrence of inheritance in this English translation Marasha?
No.
No.
The beginning one, a few of them are Yerusha or inheritance, and the last one is Morasha. The reason this banter is taking place is that they're trying for exactly that purpose, trying to understand why this word is used. The only way to do it is to compare it in Hebrew, and again, it gets lost in translation in the English. So basically, the Gemara goes back and forth. Hey, are you Yerusha or are you Matana? Are you an inheritance or are you a present? And then he says, no, I'm a Morasha. I'm a completely different beast. I'm a Morasha. What is a Morasha?
Because an inheritance could be a gift or legally determined. I mean, inheritance by itself doesn't necessarily exclude gift.
True. So the Gemara is basically trying, but the Gemara is trying to decipher what is Eretz Yisrael. Is the land of Israel a gift to the people, or is it an inheritance to the people? So it could be one and the same, but they're getting nitty gritty into the details of it, like what does it actually mean? But then why is the word morasha used? Why is the word heritage used for lack of appropriate translation? And so here, Rabbi Hoshea says it's a language of doubt, a language of weakening. And morasha is a lesser form of Yerusha. So why is that? A weaker. Yes, not lesser. I'm correct. A weaker form.
Just because it's not legally
It's almost
They utilize that thought of Rabbi Hoshea in interpreting source 1 and source 2.
And I think actually, Sam, you said it before.
because it's like almost like diluted. Like inheritance is for you, like it's more specific. And if you go into the word Morasha, it's in heritage, it's more for the masses, it's not like specific. A
Right.
little bit more diluted.
So it's for sure it's for the masses, but I think you said it. I'm pretty sure you said it before that it's not a given. It's not a given.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I said that right.
Of course I
No,
did.
that a heritage is not. So here, Rav Hoshe is saying that it's a language of doubt, meaning a heritage. You want to sorry, I'm so sorry. You
I
don't
apologize
usually do this.
to the camera.
Oh yeah.
You're going on the website.
He's worried about the inheritance.
Dad, what am I getting?
So it's a language of doubt or weakening because here, according to Rav Hosea, a morasha is not a given. It's discussed, it's very nice if the Torah is going to be available for everyone and is bequeathed to everyone, it's the entire nation, but it's not a given. So
Meaning
here,
legally
he's
binding.
implying, I'm sorry?
By not a given, you mean legally binding?
No, not about legally binding, but that it's not a given that just because I'm born into something that I get something. Whereas an inheritance is a little bit different. An inheritance is, if
Oh,
I mean
that
again,
I
there's
said.
choice. Yeah, you did say that,
That I
right?
said.
Right. That an inheritance is again, there's a choice. A parent can decide which child to give you, but assume like if there's a lot of money and
You get it.
you get it right. It goes to the next generation. Here it's saying, yes, ideally you have aspects of Yerusha, because the Shorish is the same, the root word's the same. There are aspects of it that's going to be bequeathed to the next generation, but it's a morasha. It's not a given. If you want it, it's there, but you have to earn it. You got to toil in it. So here, Rav Hoshe is saying it's a language of weakening, of doubt, because it's not a given that the Torah is going to be for everyone, and it's not a given that Eretz Yisrael is going to be for everyone, even though ideally it should be. But it's something that there's going to be personal intervention. I'm going to have to fight for something. I'm not going to get it just because I was born into it.
And also, it's not something that could necessarily, theoretically stay around if the people or, don't continue to practice
Absolutely.
Abide by it. Follow
Exactly.
it.
Follow it,
like,
learn it.
Like
Excellent.
inheritance, I mean, it's like you have it and it's tangible, so, it can go away. Like money can be spent, it can be invested forever, but eventually it's money, it's something,
Or your return,
whatever.
right, exactly.
Inflation, whatever.
Excellent.
But, like this is, something that, the people have to carry in terms, like a legacy in the first source
Yeah.
or a tradition or, and it has to be given back to, you have to give back to it in order for it to remain.
Excellent, beautiful,
Very true.
beautiful, excellent. Anybody else? So actually,
The next source
you led us right to where we're going.
is we can turn over actually because it's in Hebrew and English on the back side. Taken from one of the commentators on the 5 books of Moses on the Torah, Emek Davar, which is the commentary of a rabbi known as Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. Acronym for his name. A lot of these rabbis had acronyms like Rashi and Ramban, and Rambam, Maimonides and Nachmanides. So the acronym of his name is the Netziv. He lived from 1816 to 1893 in a town was born in Warsaw, Poland, and he was the head of the yeshiva called Volozhin, which is a big yeshiva in Poland. I've actually been there. Rachel was there. We went separately. And nowadays, the big yeshiva is a huge building. Nowadays, there is a medical school. It's housing the building, but they have one room at the bottom. When if you're traveling in Poland on a heritage tour, if you go there, they keep some of the they keep one room with the old benches and chairs. You can go there and actually study some Talmud in a building where hundreds and hundreds of students sat for many years studying Talmud, and some great minds like the Netziv used to sit. He has an amazing author of several works, and one of the most popular sources of one of his works is this commentary, which is a beautiful commentary on the Torah. So this is source number 4. Anybody want to read? It's the longest of sources tonight. So I know you did yours a bit. I'll read.
I'll read in Hebrew. or Aramaic, I guess.
Actually, I don't know the funny thing about the Hebrew that's here.
No vowels.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
That's
true.
true.
I wouldn't say that's
No.
funny, but that's true.
There are no dots or
Wrong.
I don't know
That's
what
true.
the dot,
No
there's some
vowels. Which
dots.
are the dots?
Oh,
I think Dave, you
vowels.
said something. Rashi.
I don't know what the dots were
So there's a script in Hebrew known as Rashi script, which again we can maybe talk about in another class when we go through personalities. But if you look at other Hebrew, like on the other page, you'll see it's very different writing. It's a whole way that Rashi used to write his letters. Anyway,
And this was
Marasha,
also
page number 2.
pre like Word and like change your font. So you can actually, yeah, this was a little different back in the day.
No thesaurus either. The Torah was careful not to write the word Yerusha, inheritance, is pointed out by Rabbi Naphtali Wesley. The fact is that Torah cannot be inherited, as can material goods. We have an ancient tradition warning us, Hataken atzmo lelamed Torah she'ena Yerusha. L'cha. Prepare yourself to study Torah, for it's not something that you can come by as an inheritance. Taken from the Mishnah in Avot. A person is engaged in an ongoing struggle against it. His evil urge, which tries to entice him to set aside Torah study in favor of a more valuable time, of more secularly oriented activity. That's getting him to waste his valuable time on earth. Unless he battles such urges, he will not succeed in making Torah something he truly possesses as one owns an inheritance. In the above-mentioned Mishnah in Avot, which lists 48 methods which help us in acquiring Torah, some of these characteristics one must practice are devoting a minimum of one's time to matters of secular concern, not spending too much time amassing material wealth, not indulging too much sleep, not pampering one's body, etc. On the other hand, whereas Torah is not an inherited possession of an individual to whom a learned father can bequeath it, is a collective possession of the nation, in that the nation is obliged to pass it on to the next generation, to make sure the next generation studies it and treasures it, just as a truly treasured material possession is safeguarded against being dissipated by irresponsible heirs. This is also why the land of Israel is described as something given to the Jewish people as a morasha, i.e. something not to be frittered away, but to be preserved for the following generation. In other words, whereas a Yerusha, inheritance, is something that may be enjoyed by a single generation, a morasha, a Yerusha plus, i.e. an inheritance with the heir's obligation to eventually bequeath it to his children intact, it is an inheritance designed to perpetuate itself.
Awesome. So right, so here's a little bit of a different
Excellent
twist.
reading.
Very, very good reading, yes, thank you. A little bit of a different twist, but that is that a morasha is now, it's not just something I can enjoy by myself. It's now something I have to take on the responsibility because I have an obligation to give it to the next generation intact. So it means I can't corrupt it, I can't give over a different version, it's my job to take it as it's been given to me, to keep it whole, to keep it pure, and enjoy it for myself, but then be able to pass it on to the next generation. Whereas it's very different in inheritance. Like, an inheritance is for me to enjoy. Nobody says, here's this amount of money, and don't forget, give it to your great-great-great-great-grandchildren. Nobody says that. So, whereas a morasha, so when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, when it comes to the land of Israel, and it comes to Torah, those two things we need to treat as a Yerusha plus. That's what a morasha is. It's a Yerusha plus. So I am inheriting it, me, myself, personally. We are inheriting it, this generation, us, as a nation. And not only that, we now have a responsibility to keep it intact, to take care of it, to restore it if it needs restoring, to repair it if it needs repairing, and to give it over as whole and as complete as we possibly can to the next generation. So a little bit of a different twist, but something, you see where legacy comes into this factor. Legacy, being that this is not something that I'm supposed to take to the grave with me. This is something that is meant to perpetuate itself. A morasha is a it's perpetuity. There we go. That's what a morasha is. So again, a little bit different from the source before. The Gemara says that it's something you have to work at. You have to really toil in it because it's a weaker version of Yerusha. And here he's saying it's actually a Yerusha plus. This is a more grandiose version because it's not something that one generation is going to take and live by, and that's it. An entire lifetime of people are going to benefit from this, but only if you, in the chain of command, do your part. And what's our part? Our part, well, we'll actually see in the next source, but we have to do our part in order to make it, own it personally, and then be able to bequeath it to the next generation. So, any questions? Oh, yeah,
This
yeah, please.
Mishnah is a little heavy.
Yes.
The Mishnah?
The Mishnah, the Mishnah of it's very interesting. You have to learn it have you learned it in context before?
100 years ago.
Right, it's a very, and something we can actually definitely talk about. It's a very, very interesting Mishnah that it's, that there are actually a couple of them that are together that should be learned as a unit. This is definitely like parts are extrapolated for this particular explanation.
And again, I think he quotes it to really hammer home his point.
Right, he definitely, right, it's quoted because it hammers home this particular point about Morasha, but this idea in Avot is a very powerful idea and should be learned like as a unit, because you need all the pieces together in order for it to collectively make sense, because otherwise, like, you could
hear my Hasidic clients saying Beatles, mind, exercise, and all this other thing. Why
Right.
they don't work and why they don't go to college and
Right.
a bunch of
Can I
other
say
things.
something?
Yeah, please.
I was reading something in one of the books I was reading that I guess the Hasidic don't think that they say that women aren't supposed to study Mishnah.
So there are some sects of Judaism that believe that
Like not us.
Gemara, right? That Gemara, the Talmud, should not be studied by women. There is a population of people that believe that, and then you've got,
Everybody
the
else.
others
No,
who
I
say
was
that
just
there's not.
curious, like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So I think that I think that's part of that is sociological. Part of that I think is heritage in a different sense. Like where Sephardim are different than Ashkenazim, and then you have like different breakoffs and people's history, your hometowns, again, sociology, demographics. Like a lot of these factors play into why certain groups have certain traditions. But there's no law or anything about it. It's just
I'm gonna do it anyways. But
yeah, no, but it's really just a matter
Women are
of,
certainly not banned
right.
from the study of Talmud
yeah,
or any
definitely not.
text.
Definitely
Oh,
not.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure not. So, but very, very good question. But there's been an evolution, so to speak, in how the different sects of Judaism have evolved, and why you go to one community and they do things this way, and you walk 2 blocks down and they do things that way. So like that's,
Yeah, I was
there's
reading the book Rush's Daughter,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
he was talking about that because he didn't have any sons, and so he taught his daughters in secret,
right.
Yeah.
which is very.
Right.
It's also
That's what
said
that
of,
kinda came
of
into,
Rashi's
yeah.
daughters, which is just pointed
Fascinating
out,
books,
he
read
did not
them.
have any sons. He's a leading sage and mind. It's also said of Rashi's daughters that they wore tefillin,
Right.
Yeah.
that they wore phylacteries, which are traditionally only worn by men,
Mm-hmm.
and that they were if not equal to their father, but certainly very, very wise and learned, which was rare for women in those times. And the promulgation of women studying Bible and text and Talmud has really only flourished, I'd say, in the last 30 years. And nowadays in
As a
Israel,
public forum, yeah.
in Israel and here in New York, there are institutions for women to study on a higher level, which were never publicly done. And women studying and sitting for 8 hours a day, just like men do in seminaries and institutions of higher learning, sitting all day studying over text. It's really taken off for good reason. Anybody wants to take
Trying
a
to
tour?
get off topic, but I'm like,
No,
oh,
it's
that reminded me
an
of that
important
one.
piece. Yeah.
Any other questions? But yeah, but it's a very interesting thing, and it's interesting because like just on that topic alone, where it says like I think it said like not pampering one's body, not indulging in too much sleep, not amassing material wealth. It's really more about balance, because I can tell you that Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi of Israel, says that eating healthy, exercise is a must, an absolute must, because if your body isn't what it's supposed to be, then your mind isn't what it's supposed to be, and you can't even enjoy Torah the way you're supposed to enjoy Torah and learn the way you're supposed to learn if your body isn't physically capable of doing that. And we know that exercise is good for the mind, it's good for the body, it's good for health, it's good for energy. There are all these things that come along with it. So
He was also a vegetarian.
he was vegetarian.
Yeah.
Explain what because they don't smoke and they're all over.
He was
Right.
a vegetarian
Yeah.
except for
Right,
Shabbat.
exactly.
He
There's
eat
no-
on Shabbat.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's not really proven though.
I don't know if that's, I'm not sure. Okay, but source number 5. So this is another, oh sorry, what?
No, someone said that on
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, somebody
That
said
like when the Messiah comes, everyone's going to be vegetarian.
Right. And George and I were like, no, I hope not.
Well, in that case, we better eat up, guys.
Enjoy your Sunday.
So the next source is actually taken from the Babylonian Talmud, from the Masachet Pesachim, and very, very interesting source. Okay, so I'll read this one. For it is said, Moses commanded us a law and inheritance, a morasha. Again, bad translation, but the word there is morasha. So what the Gemara here is, the Gemara is interpreting the phrase of Torah tzliva lanu Moshe morasha kihilat Yaakov. The Gemara is interpreting the phrase where morasha is used in the context of Torah. For it is said, Moses commanded us a law, a morasha, of the congregation of Jacob. Read not morasha, but meorasa. So the Gemara very often does this. It like plays. It's like a play on words. He says, don't call it a morasha, don't call it a heritage, call it meorasa. So it sounds alike. And what's a meorasa? Meorasa means engaged or betrothed. So what's the Gemara's interpretation of what a morasha is? The way we treat a spouse, the way we treat a significant other, the way you treat a relationship. So what does that mean? you're talking about serious input of time, emotional energy, physical energy, love, yourself, your character, your values. You're like investment. So when he talks about don't read the word morashah, interpret it as betrothal, it means we need to be betrothed to the Torah and we need to be betrothed to the lands of Israel. So it means we need to treat the lands of Israel and treat the Torah as if this is a real life relationship where we have to put in the time, we have to put in the effort. You gotta have FaceTime. You have to have toil. You have to sweat through it. You'll have ups and downs. So when you read it as Ma'orasah, it brings on this like life to Morashah. It's no longer this I guess static inheritance. It's not money. It's not a ring. It's not an heirloom. It's not anything like that. It's something that's alive. It's bubbling. It's passionate. There is something involved in it. And we also see this source actually really coupled with the other Gemara from the Talmud Yerushalmi, that you have to actually work at it. This really goes hand in hand. That it's a weaker version. A Morashah is a weaker version because I can't just expect to show up at a relationship 6 years down the road and say, "Hey, how are things going? Where have you been?" It doesn't work like that.
Really?
It's like it's something that needs daily intervention. It needs daily effort and daily time. So, and the question is, how do you do that? There are lots of mechanisms and ways that both for Eretz Yisrael, for the land of Israel, as well for Torah, that this can be actualized. But that if we shift our mindset and don't treat it as a heritage, but we treat it as a betrothal, we treat it as a relationship, as a loving relationship, all of a sudden it takes on a completely different meaning to it. So, any questions on that source? It's a really just interesting shift and play on words.
Which leads beautifully into the last source.
Yes.
Which is source number 6, taken from Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis. Anybody want to read?
I can read.
Thank you.
Now it came to pass at the end of the days that Cain brought of the fruit of the soil an offering to the Lord. And Abel he too brought of the firstborn of his flocks and of their fattest. And the Lord turned to Abel and to his offering.
Excellent. So, familiar story. Cain and Abel, right?
Right.
They each bring a sacrifice to God. Cain brings the fruit of the soil, and Abel brings like the fattiest, the best of his flock, and God, as we know, accepts Abel. So one of the reasoning behind this is that Abel gave of his of the best of the best, and while Cain gave the best of the best, he gave the best of his crops, which has a much less monetary value, or not but it's significant value than sheep did in those days, and than flocks and animals did in those days. So to bring a korban, to bring a sacrifice of the firstborn of the fattiest of his flock is like the highest monetary form of giving. Whereas Cain, it was fine, but it wasn't this like excitement and same level of giving. So that's the loose interpretation of it. But there's actually a very interesting difference in the words that are used here. Again, playing on the words of the text. There are no superfluous words in the Torah. There's no extra words. So every word has significance and meaning. So when it describes Cain's offering, it says the end of the days, and Cain brings this mincha laHashem. He brings this gift to God. Vehevel hevi gam hu, and Hevel also himself brings. And then it describes what he brings. He brings the flock. So I think there are two extra words here. The words gamhu, which means also him, that I think are really a key to understanding this idea of morashah, this idea of heritage or Yerusha plus, or however we want, or betrothal, however we want to interpret it. That the way we need to go about it is what Abel did. That he brought himself along with the sacrifice. So the hevel hivi gamhu, when you actually translate it literally, it means he also brought himself. That in addition to bringing the sacrifice to God, in addition to just, striking the match, killing the animal, letting everything go up to God, he brought himself to the game also. That he brought his effort, he brought his passion, he brought his love, he brought his desire to the Mizbeach, to the altar, to be able to bring this sacrifice to God. That it's not enough to just give, but that we have to be included in the process. And I think that's definitely a recipe for more things than just what we're talking about here. But that when we really look at the word morashah and we look at at the context in which the word is used with Torah and with Eretz Yisrael, that it becomes incumbent upon all of us, hevi gamhu, that we also have to bring ourselves. That it's not enough to learn it academically. You need to learn it and feel it intuitively and internalize it, experience it. The same thing with Eretz Yisrael, that it's with the land of Israel, that it's not enough to just to, let's say, just visit, but you want to feel connected to the land, connected to the people, connected to the purpose of the land, connected to the, to religiosity, to spirituality,